Welcome to Part 3, Phenomenology and Nursing Knowledge Development. Phenomenology did not become evident in the nursing literature until the 1970s. In the last several decades, it has become a dominant force in knowledge acquisition. In fact, phenomenology has currently been viewed in the nursing movement as an alternative to empirical science, in attempting to further discern and understand nursing phenomena, particularly in the context of lived experiences. In other words, the popularity of phenomenology as a research approach in nursing may be attributed to its potential to provide ways of understanding knowledge that is rather ethical and experiential, or simply beyond empiricism. In essence, its philosophical underpinnings remain consistent with the values of nursing practice, namely, perceiving the uniqueness of the person, acknowledging the importance of self discovery and acceptance of life situations, recognizing the need for the exploration of experiences, establishing personal relationships, exploring the potential for personal growth, and utilizing the therapeutic use of self as mechanism or tool. As previously mentioned, the variability of phenomenological approaches, as evidenced by the evolution of various perspectives during the last century, it cannot be denied that a sound understanding of the dualism of phenomenology being a philosophy and research method seems overwhelming at first. This variability or diversity usually refers to either the context of what is interpreted as essential or the involved methodological process per se. Hence, it has been proven difficult to comprehend the salient features of phenomenology when philosophers vary in their verbiage. The esotericism behind the language usage by many philosophers has paved way to confusion and dismay among fledgling nurse researchers. There are several factors that have been identified to give rise to the confusion about phenomenology. First is the dualistic nature of phenomenology as both philosophy and research method. Second, there are various schools of thought in phenomenology that also vary in the specific philosophical paradigms that they fall under. There are also various forms, for instance, transcendental versus existential versus hermeneutic phenomenology. And with the diversity in forms, there are, of course, multiple phenomenologists who have varying perspectives and ideologies. And finally, the emergence of other phenomenological labels. One of such labels is the coining of the term new phenomenology. It is a term that has been referred to as a transformative research method utilized by nurses versus the traditional form. Another label that is evident in the literature pertains to the specific historical phase of phenomenological development. It can either be in the German phase, referring to the works of Husserl, Heidegger, Gadamer, just to name a few, or the French phase, referring to the works of Marcel, Merleau-Ponty, Sartre, among others. And finally, one other label is that of the school of thought involved. Is it Husserlian, Heideggerian? Is it Dutch or Utrecht phenomenology? Despite the controversies, the influence of phenomenology on nursing knowledge development ensued. For instance, Hermeneutic phenomenology has made relevant contributions to the development of nursing knowledge, vis-a-vis Carper's patterns of knowing, connoting the generation of empirical, ethical, personal, and aesthetic knowing. In addition, nurses have begun incorporating phenomenology as a means of exploring patients' lived experiences of illness and disease that cannot be analyzed or interpreted by the empiricist methodologies, allowing them to grasp the customary, the unforeseen, and the indescribable dimensions of the human experience throughout the continuum of health and illness. There are many nurse theorists who ground their theoretical perspectives in phenomenology. However, the most noted nurse scholars that have contributed to nursing knowledge development include Patricia Benner, Rosemary Rizzo Parse, Josephine Patterson and Lorraine Ziderad, and Jean Watson. Although Benner acknowledges the influence of Virginia Henderson in the development of her theory from novice to expert, excellence and power in clinical nursing practice, she was challenged to discover and describe the knowledge that is embedded in nursing practice. She believes that clinical situations are always more complex and varied than the theoretical accounts, implying that clinical practice is indeed an area of scientific inquiry and source of knowledge development. During her doctoral studies, she was introduced to phenomenology by several of her mentors and colleagues, eventually allowing her to adapt the works of Heidegger, Gadamer, and Merleau-Ponty. She posits that the skills obtained through the nursing experience and the development of perceptual awareness among expert nurses lead them to instinctively follow their hunches while searching for evidence to confirm the subtle changes in their observation of patients. The idea that experience becomes the outcome when preconceived notions are challenged, refined, or refuted in real situations is actually adapted from the works of Heidegger and Gadamer. In time, when the nurse gains more experience, the clinical knowledge evolves into a blend of both theoretical and practical knowledge. The nurse continues to test and modify principle based expectations and eventually leading to expertise. Heideggerian influence is evident in the above aspect of her theory development process, especially in the phenomenological description of person as a self interpreting being that is defined by concerns, practices, and life experiences, not coming into the world predefined, but gets defined in the course of living a life. Patricia Benner's approach to the development of her novice to expert theory involved the collection and interpretation of exemplars. The use of this interpretive phenomenological methodology led to the classification system for clinical nursing roles and functions that we all know today. Rosemary Rizzo Parse was influenced by colleagues while working as faculty member in Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which was attributed as the center for existential phenomenological movement in the United States back in the 1960s and 1970s. In the midst of developing her theory, she engaged in dialogue with the known scholars in the school of thought, such as Van Kam and Giordi. This later on redirected her focus on specifically the lived experiences of human beings, along with their situated freedom and participation in life. She extracted features from the works of Heidegger and Gadamer to develop a hermeneutical theoretical foundation for the human sciences, which she later coined human becoming. She further explicated her theory of human becoming into a hermeneutic research methodology, a method unique to nursing that aims at discovering the emergent meanings of human experiences. She has conducted and published numerous investigations involving a wide variety of phenomena, including but not limited to laughter, health, aging, quality of life, joy, sorrow, contentment, hope, etc. Developed in the 1960s, Patterson and Zederod's meta-theory of humanistic nursing evolved during the last 2 decades, as the framework was further developed through the works of their students. Aimed at nursing theory development through the study of the existence and reality of nursing, the theory posits that nursing is an intersubjective transactional relationship between nurse and patient, who are both human beings coexisting in the world. Existentialism is used as a conceptual framework and uses phenomenological inquiry that nurses may utilize to be able to explore and understand their daily practice by describing the essences of their experiences. Often viewed as a lived dialogue, humanistic nursing places the nurse's center of the universe at the nurse patient intersubjective transaction. The theory proposes that clusters of phenomena can be ordered as common beliefs or values to nursing practice. Jean Watson's theory is also grounded in the philosophical tenets of phenomenology. Her seminal work on caring in the relationship between nurse and patient tackles the concepts of freedom, subjectivity, intersubjectivity, and meaning of experience. She gives credit to other nurse theorists such as Nightingale, Henderson, Leninger, Peplau during her theory development phase. However, in her most recent work, she also refers to the works of Maslow, Erickson, as well as phenomenologists Heidegger and Sartre. She drew heavily on the sciences and the humanities, providing more of a phenomenological, existential, and even spiritual orientation to her theory development. She was influenced by behaviorist Carl Rogers because of his phenomenological approach in attempting to understand human behavior. After mentioning the relevance and usefulness of phenomenological methodologies in nursing research, there have been various criticisms that question their suitability for scholarship. For instance, Crotty looked into the phenomenological research work among nurse researchers in North America and arrived at the conclusion that the methods used were not critical and were just predominantly descriptive, offering little more than symbolic interactionism and humanistic psychology, as opposed to the critical approach that was developed by phenomenologists of the European tradition. Another criticism goes further and accuses nurse researchers to use phenomenology as a research method without establishing a strong knowledge base or philosophical foundation, resulting to deviations from the original theory by abdicating the Baroque intricacies of high phenomenology and in place just use simple basic assumptions. Paley is probably the most critical in examining the use of phenomenology in nursing research. First, he explores that nurse researchers who adapt Husserl's philosophical tenets misconstrue the concepts of reduction, phenomena, and essence, claiming that the adaptation bears very little resemblance to the original. Paley argues that nurse researchers' determination of the essential structure are oftentimes unintelligible. Paley also disputes the usage of Heideggerian phenomenology in nursing literature, judging methodological implications to be inaccurate. And finally, Ortiz also critically studied the works of prominent nurse theorists, such as Benner and Dickelman and his associates, as far as their use of hermeneutic phenomenology, rendering their work inconsistent with Heideggerian focus or principles.